All right, it's going to be a little bit different this time. Maybe a bit of a rant. We'll see if it gets to that level. As I explain why I just don't debate people who sit in the armchair of no knowledge anymore. So, let's get into it. Okay, so if you hear a mower going in the background, it's because each day there's a different neighbor mowing their lawn. And it's just becoming very difficult to work around them anymore. I don't want to record when they mow, but they're making it to where I have no choice. Neighbors, what are you going to do? So lately I've been having a lot of people who have been seeking to debate me, or wanting to send me a rebuttal, wanting to question me on how do you know magic's real, how do you account for post hoc reasoning. Because I've been doing this for decades, I've been doing this a while. And true knowledge comes from experience. Like you could be reading a lot of books on magic and the occult, but if you don't put that into use, you are not getting experience, you're not getting true knowledge. All you have is a set of instructional information. And that's what we refer to as armchair magicians, armchair occultists. They may have a lot of information that they've collected out of books, but they've never put any of that to use, and therefore they don't have the experience and they don't have true knowledge. They just sit in their armchair coming up with theories, wanting to debate you, and it can become rather quite annoying. Now, I have stated this up front in my very first videos, but I think it's time for a reminder. I am not out to prove anything to you, for I have nothing to prove. I'm not out to prove to you that magic is real, because no one can prove to you that magic is real. Only you can prove to you that magic is real. By doing the work. All I'm here to do is share my experience and my experiences with you. And true knowledge comes from experience. They get upset. They're like, oh, why won't you debate me? What do you have to be afraid of? When it doesn't have anything to do with that. It has to do with it being a waste of my time. I only get so much time, and I can either spend it in endless debates with them, which is what they want, or I can actually do something productive. I could sit there and I can give them all the answers, but what I can't give them is the experience. Now, if they just buckled down and did the work, they would get both. I mean, this may be hard for you to believe, but I'm not the best teacher. Experience is the best teacher. That's where you receive true knowledge. You wonder why I don't want to debate you when the inexperience shows in your questions and in your arguments. You got to understand that some people just want to argue for argument's sake. And when you come across that, realize that that's coming from the ego. So I'm not interested in having debate. To me, that's a waste of time because I can't prove anything to you. And it would do more harm than good because I can't prove to them in that moment that magic is real. And they would take that as confirmation of their own skeptical bias to say, see, I told you magic doesn't work. But just as I can't prove to them in a debate that magic is real, they can't prove that it isn't real. But they'll only take the part that magic couldn't be proven in the debate as proof. That's why skeptics and naysayers love to debate so much. They know it can't be proven within the debate. So there's really no upside to it. It's not a win-win. And if you're going to persuade me of anything, you need to make it a win-win situation. Remember the great debate that I had with the religious guy? There was really no upside to that. It was entertaining, but, aside from that, it didn't change his mind or anything. In fact, it probably reaffirmed his religious bias. So I'm not even interested in debating anymore. The only way I would even consider it is with someone who has reached at least the great portal. And I don't want that to sound elitist. I'm not trying to be. Perhaps this is why people think that magicians are. Like, they get mad. They get offended. Well, you're just being closed-minded, Frater, because you won't debate me. No, it's before magic I was closed-minded. Now I'm open. It's just that you have no knowledge. And I'm not going to sit there and debate someone while they're sitting in the armchair of no knowledge. And I know that sounds like I'm being elitist, but it's not. Let me put it to you in perspective, okay? So I had this guy who was always emailing me question after question after question after question. He had 100 questions, he says. And I did my best to answer them. Some slipped through the cracks. I can't answer them all. Which people tend to get upset with that too because they somehow feel they're entitled to all your time, as if I don't have hundreds of other people emailing me as well. But I did my best to answer, and he actually started having magical successes But at some point he went from a believer to a skeptic, which is kind of weird. Usually people start out as skeptics and then turn believer. But he went the opposite. And not just a little skepticism, because a little skepticism is very healthy. But no, he went full-blown atheist. And you know what an atheist is? It's a person who tried to figure it out, gave up, and wants other people to give up too. Because everyone wants people to be like them, even atheists. They gave up on seeking the knowledge, but they don't want to feel as if they don't have the knowledge, so they just claim that nothing is the knowledge. And this guy is a classic example of that because he wrote to me in one of his emails that he had begun self-initiation, but admitted that he didn't even make it through the neophyte grade. He quit. Same thing an atheist does. But if you're going to quit, neophyte is the best time to quit. You don't want to wait until you're in the elemental grades. That's why neophyte is the probationary grade. You try it on for size, and if it don't fit, you don't continue. Well, he didn't continue. He gave up, he turned skeptic, and now he wanted to debate me on the validity of magic from the Armchair of No Knowledge. And all of the questions that he had asked me, many of them would have been answered in the curriculum had he just stuck with it. Things are answered over time, but he was being greedy. He wanted all the knowledge at once. He didn't want to put in the time. He didn't want to put in the effort. He just wanted things answered for him. And when faced with many, many years of hard work, he gave up. But yet, he still thinks he knows it all. And even worse, thinks that I owed him my time for a debate. No. Everything that you wanted to know would have been answered over time if you just had the patience. So is it elitist of me to not want to debate magic and the occult with someone who, by their own admission, didn't even finish the neophyte grade? When for years I've been going to temple every damn day, putting in the work, putting in the effort, honing my skills in the art and the great work. Perhaps I'll leave that to you, but I do know that it's a waste of time. Well, he wasn't too happy with that. But at least he started the initiation process. Most people who want to debate me don't even do that. They didn't even start the neophyte grade. The initiation process turns your entire way of thinking around. So how do you plan on debating somebody who's gone through that if you haven't gone through that yourself? It's like a kindergartner trying to debate a senior in high school. Or someone in high school trying to debate somebody in their 50s when they don't have the life experience necessary to know what they're talking about. Now, I'm not saying that these people who want to debate me aren't smart. I'm not saying that at all. I just recently got offered an invitation to debate a scientist on a podcast, science versus magic. And I appreciate the offer, but, what good does that really do? I can't prove magic over a podcast. All I could do is share my experiences, and I do that already here. I don't even know how many listeners the podcast has. I didn't inquire, because I'm not interested in fame. Quite the opposite, in fact. I really value my privacy. Most people seek out fame for ego validation, but I don't need any of that. The more I'm left alone, the happier I am. But to get back on track, I don't think that the people who want to debate me are stupid, okay? I don't. But you do need to understand something. Intelligence is not wisdom. A lot of people mistake one for the other, but they're not the same thing. I'm going to say it again because this was almost the title of this video. Intelligence is not wisdom. Remember that at one time, the most brilliant scientists in the world had theorized that if they detonated an atomic bomb, it would ignite the atmosphere and kill all life on the planet. And they did it anyway. Intelligence is not wisdom. Some of the smartest people do some of the dumbest things. They have no wisdom. They have no discernment. And it's because they're too trapped in their left brain. Logic, deduction, reasoning. And they're cut off from the intuitive right side of the brain. The emotional mind. And they look like Mark Zuckerberg, like an android or robot without any feeling. Just a computer and brain and nothing more. The skeptical scientist resides in the left brain. They don't cross the divide. They don't come across into the right side of the mind. Now, I don't want to make it seem like logic and reason and the left side of the mind is a bad thing. It's not. The problem begins when you're too analytical, when you're too logical, when you're too stuck in your head. You remember the guy who I referred to as having nerd brain, who was too focused on correcting a statistic that he missed the entire point of what I was getting at? Being trapped in that analytical left side of the mind causes a lot of problems. R.S.D. Tyler, he talks about how one of the main problems that men have in meeting women is they're too stuck in their head. They're too trapped in that analytical left side of the mind. Instead of being natural, spontaneous, and going with the flow, they're too worried about what they're going to say in advance and how they're going to approach, and they end up coming off as awkward and weird instead of just natural and relaxed. So I'm not saying that the logical left side of the brain is bad. What I am saying is that too much of it is bad. Just as too much of the right brain with not enough logic would be bad. Striving to achieve a balance is the key. That's the sweet spot. It's required for magic. You have to combine force and form. Combine the left and the right side. And the naysayers are always on the left side. Well, magic isn't logical. It's not reasonable. Well, yeah, that's why it's magic. It's not always going to make sense when things happen. Weird things are going to happen. Extraordinary things are going to happen. But oh no, just because I don't believe it, it must not be true. Just like the guy who said I was given false hope by sharing a testimonial of someone who healed their grandfather of cancer. And then I asked, why are you looking at the glass half empty and assuming failure when you could be assuming success? Well, it's because he's a pessimist and a skeptic, a naysayer. And he doubled down saying that I was giving people false hope. Well, maybe it's false hope to him because he can't get it to work. But just because he can't get it to work doesn't mean nobody else can. I mean, how arrogant is that to assume that just because you can't get it to work, nobody else can either? I bet in all his logic and reasoning, he never thought that the reason he's having trouble manifesting is because he's too stuck in his head. Because just like when you're trying to meet a woman and you're too stuck in your head, you get all awkward and you're probably going to get rejected, it's very similar with magic. If you're too stuck in that logical left side of the mind, you're going to have trouble manifesting and doing successful magic. You got to combine force and form. One of the things that the skeptical guy that I talked about earlier had problems with was he had difficulty reconciling the paradoxes, coming to grips with the contradictions. But in a world of duality, you're always going to have paradoxes and contradictions. And the best we could do to reconcile them is to find balance between the two. In Hermeticism, we always strive to seek balance. That's where the sweet spot is in occult magic. Between the conscious side of the mind and the subconscious side. Between the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain. Between the two pillars. Everything is about finding that balance. And when you do find that balance, things work amazingly. But science and skepticism always resides on the logical left side. Science is all about quantifying things. How much? Breaking things down to their periodic elements. And if they can't quantify it, to them it doesn't exist. But with magic, how do you quantify the unquantifiable? Now, what are some of the most brilliant scientists that we have today? Like physicists, right? Physicists study physics. Physics has to do with the physical. If they can't detect it with their senses or their instruments, then it does not exist. So how do we know it exists? How do we know that magic is real? If it's unquantifiable, if we can't detect it physically, then how do we know? We get the knowledge through our experience, by doing the work and finding out for ourselves. All the incredible testimonials that I have coming into this channel, you can be skeptical all you want, but you'll never sway their belief. You know why? Because they had the experience. So they have the knowledge. I just don't have the time for naysayers anymore. I don't have room for that kind of negativity in my life. And I'm not talking about being invited to the podcast, which I do appreciate. That wasn't naysaying. That was just trying to fill a time slot. I get it. I'm talking about the ones who want me to prove to them that magic is real, or they just won't believe me. Well, I don't care if you believe me. Either get your butt up out of the armchair of no knowledge and do the work and find out for yourself, or you don't. And I'm tired of people using coincidence as an excuse. Oh, it's just a coincidence. Well, yeah, magic is always a coincidence. It's always going to manifest in some sort of logical means. So then the question becomes, how many coincidences do you need personally for you to believe that the coincidence isn't a coincidence? Because if you're still skeptical after having something manifest, then you either haven't had enough coincidences or you haven't had something big enough manifest. And the people who have will not be swayed by your arguments. They're not going to let somebody who hasn't had the experience tell them how it is when they have. The occult, particularly ceremonial magic, attracts a lot of analytical left-brain people. And ironically, that's one of the biggest hindrances and obstacles to their success. Many of them never get out of the armchair of no knowledge because their cerebral intellect is satisfied with reading a lot of books and collecting a lot of information, thereby assuming that they have great knowledge when they don't. Knowledge means to know, and you don't know unless you've had the experience. You just have data. You have no first-hand knowledge. The ones who actually do get out of the armchair of no knowledge and practice what they've been learning, the challenge for them is typically merging the right and the left side of the brain, introducing emotion and feeling, adding that force to the form that they already are good with. And if they can't, then they're not going to be as successful as they could be. There's no bigger ego than someone who sits in the armchair of no knowledge who wants to tell others that they can't do something because they can't get it to work themselves. You wouldn't come to me for plumbing advice because I'm not a plumber. I don't have extensive plumbing experience. So then why would you take magical advice from someone who has little to no experience with magic? Beware the armchair occultists and the naysayers. Now, some skepticism is healthy and good. I mean, there are a lot of frauds out there. You have to be careful. But that shouldn't be a problem for most of you because if you've listened to this channel for any length of time, you have a basic understanding of how all of this works. Because in the majority of those type of scams, they're not going to be able to explain these things to you. They're not going to explain to you the law of polarity. They're not going to explain to you force and form. They're not going to be able to go over the Hermetic principles with you. They're going to be like, hey, send me $100 and I'll do the magic for you. Not that there's anything wrong with doing magic for clients, but make sure that whoever you're hiring is knowledgeable. And when you understand that being knowledgeable means they have a whole lot of experience and not just a collection of information, takes on a whole new meaning. Now, the thing is, a lot of people think they know everything, especially young people. Young people think they have it all figured out until they get older and realize they didn't really know as much as they thought they did. But we're all constantly learning. But that being the case, we're still all at different levels in different areas. So before you go off trying to debate somebody in a specific area, you may want to check your level of knowledge and experience in that area to theirs before you waste both of your time. And you could be the smartest person in the world. Doesn't mean you have knowledge or wisdom. Just means you have informational data. It means you have a good left side brain computer. That's another thing that they don't get either, is that logical left side of the brain is what separates us from the rest of nature. Deduction and reasoning and logic. It's what we were blessed and cursed with when man fell, if you want to look at it in a biblical sense. That logical left side is what they revere so much. It's the holy of holies. And they're like, yes, it's what makes mankind unique. So let me say it again so you can understand it better. It's what separates us from nature. Separation from the divine. Separation from the subconscious mind. And you're like, Frater, are you telling me to abandon logic and reason? Are you serious? No, I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that it takes two halves to make you whole. Dwelling entirely in the logical, robotic left side is just as bad as someone who dwells entirely in the right side, who abandons all logic and reason, is delusional, perhaps a religious zealot without critical thinking. You can be a scientific zealot. There's a lot of that in today's world. You need to combine the two halves in order to make you whole. It's not a one side or the other thing as those in duality make it out to be. Reconcile the paradox by achieving balance between the two. So if you do magic, say 20 times, and 18 of those times something manifests that was exactly what you asked for, how many coincidences do you need before you're like, oh, maybe there is something to this? You're supposed to be a person of logic. Use your critical thinking. I can't do it for you. It's something that you're going to have to learn through experience, which is where true knowledge comes from. And I think that will do it for today. I didn't even want to make this video, but enough people had been wanting to debate me recently that I kind of felt I needed to, so that when it happens in the future, I can just point them to this video. And the other thing is, I keep saying it, but apparently people aren't listening or they just don't respect me enough, is I just don't have time for it. I don't have the time to debate you. I don't have time to even really chit-chat with you. As much as I'd like to, I'd love to just be able to just sit around and chit-chat. This is as close as it comes. But I just have way too much stuff to do. I mean, if there's a short question that you're really stuck on, then I'll do my best to help with it. If you're having an issue with a purchase, then of course I'm going to provide customer service. But beyond that, I mean, come on, guys, let me at least get caught up on some things, okay? Let me at least get the next program released. I got some great stuff coming. Please allow me the time to work on it. All these cover art redesigns of my programs are leading up to something, but I need the time to work on it. Anyway, that's my little rant on why I don't do debates, especially with people who sit in the armchair of no knowledge. Leave a like and share it if you enjoyed it. Or if you didn't, then that's fine too. It's all duality to me. Consider following me on Twitter at Frater Xavier. And you're welcome to join us over at Patreon or Subscribestar, where all supporters get early access to these videos before they're available elsewhere. I'm Frater Xavier. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. Take care.